crash outside of DC on Wednesday night, without providing any evidence of a link between the two. Donald Trump claimed that FAA's DEI policies had included hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. Trump repeatedly has cited DEI policies, a favorite boogeyman at the Federal Aviation Administration, as having some role in the plane collision during the White House remarks. He also blamed Democrats and advanced inclusive workplace policies. While the cause of the crash isn't yet known, Trump implicitly has equated racial, gender, and other forms of diversity with a lower quality federal workforce.
My administration will set the highest possible bar for aviation safety. We have to have our smartest people. It doesn't matter what they look like, how they speak, who they are. It matters intellect, talent, the word talent. You have to be talented, naturally talented geniuses. You can't have regular people doing that job. They won't be able to do it. But we'll restore faith in American air travel. I'll have more to say about that. I do want to point out that various articles that appeared prior to my entering office, and here's one. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. That is amazing.
The deadliest air crash in nearly a quarter of a century in the United States. Donald Trump appointed Christopher Roccellio, a 22-year FAA veteran, as acting administrator of the agency. Mr. Trump described him as a highly respected person, and the Federal Aviation Administration's most recent administrator, we're talking about Michael Whitaker, who resigned when President Trump took office last week. He had held the job for 15 months. And India's real GDP, as far as this is just ahead of the budget session, the GDP growth for the financial year 26 is projected to be 6.3 to 6.8%, according to the economic survey of 24-25. The forecast suggests economic conditions will remain sluggish next year, and India's GDP grew by an impressive 8.2% during the financial year 23-24 and continued to be the fastest growing as far as the major economies are concerned. The economy grew by 7.2% in 22-23 and 8.7% in 21-22. US officials are probing whether Chinese AI startup DeepSeek bought advanced NVIDIA semiconductors through third parties in Singapore, circumventing US restrictions on sales of chips used for artificial intelligence tasks. As per reports, congressional offices, meanwhile, are being warned not to use DeepSeek, an upstart Chinese chatbot that is roiling the American AI market. This as the bipartisan leaders of an influential congressional committee has said that NVIDIA chips should be hit with tighter US export controls following revelations that the company's technology was used by Chinese AI startup DeepSeek. And US President Donald Trump has said that he will follow through with his threat to hit imports from Canada and Mexico with 25% border taxes known as tariffs from the 1st of February, that's tomorrow. But he added that a decision about whether this would include oil from those countries has yet not been made. Speaking to reporters in the Oval Office, Donald Trump said that the move was aimed to address the large amounts of undocumented migrants and the fentanyl that comes from across the US borders, as well as trade deficits with its neighbors.
We'll be announcing the tariffs on Canada and Mexico for a number of reasons. Number one is the people that have poured into our country so horribly and so much. Number two are the drugs, fentanyl, and everything else that have come into the country. And number three are the massive subsidies that we're giving to Canada and to Mexico in the form of deficits. And I'll be putting the tariff of 25% on Canada and separately 25% on Mexico. And we will really have to do that because we have very big deficits with those countries. Those tariffs may or may not rise with time.
And Donald Trump has once again issued a warning to BRICS nations, threatening 100% tariffs on their exports if they attempt to replace the US dollar as the dominant currency in international trade. Trump has repeatedly expressed his stance against de-dollarization, warning that BRICS countries must maintain that the US dollar's role as far as global trade, or otherwise they will have to face economic consequences, following the growing calls within the BRICS bloc to shift away from the dollar. And staying with news of Donald Trump, well, his interest in buying Greenland is not a joke. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said in an interview on Thursday, adding that acquiring Greenland was in the U.S. national interest and needs to be solved. Trump has expressed interest in making Greenland an autonomous territory of Denmark, a part of the U.S. Since his re-election in November, he hasn't ruled out using military or economic power to persuade Denmark to hand it over. And U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that President Donald Trump's desire to acquire Greenland and retake control of the Panama Canal is driven by legitimate national security interests stemming from growing concerns about Chinese activity and influence in the Arctic and in Latin America.
The priority of the FBI, if I'm confirmed, will be to ensure that our communities are protected and safeguarded and our children have parks to play in and not needles to walk over. I'd like to welcome my father, Pramod, and my mother, Anjana, who are sitting here today. They traveled here to get here from India. My sister's also here, Nisha. She also traversed the oceans just to be with me here today. It means the world that you guys are here. Jesse Grishna.
I went with former Congressman Dennis Kucinich, who had been there many times before and who had met with Assad before. A number of topics were covered and discussed, and to directly answer your question, yes. Senator, I'm offended by the question because my sole focus, commitment, and responsibility is about our own nation, our own security, and the interests of the American people.
And 8 more hostages held by Hamas in Gaza have been released amid chaotic scenes as part of the ceasefire deal with Israel. 3 Israelis and 5 Thai nationals were handed over to the Red Cross by Hamas before being transferred to Israeli forces and taken to Israel. A total of 110 Palestinians were later released from Israeli prisons, including 32 with life sentences and 30 minors. Israel delayed their release in response to the way the hostages were treated as they were handed over. And Syria's newly appointed president, Ahmed al-Shara, said on Thursday that he will form an inclusive transitional government representing diverse communities that will build institutions and run the country until it can hold free and fair elections. Shara has addressed the nation in his first speech since being appointed president for the transitional period on Wednesday by armed factions that ousted the former Syrian president Bashar al-Assad in a lightning offensive last year.
وسنعمل على تشكيل حكومة انتقالية شاملة تعبر عن تنوع سوريا برجالها ونسائها وشبابها وتتولى العمل على بناء مؤسسات سوريا الجديدة حتى نصل إلى مرحلة انتخابات حرة نزيهة.
And 3 more incidents of anti-Semitic graffiti were found across Sydney on Thursday morning, leading Australian political leaders to warn of an escalation in hatred and decry as terrorism explosives found earlier in a trailer on the city's outskirts. Now, law enforcement earlier this month found a list of Jewish targets together with it was a lot of power gel, an explosive that was used in the mining industry in Sydney's outer suburb of Tyrrell. This is what the state police really had to say, and the amount uncovered could create a bomb with a blast zone of around 40 meters. That's about 130 feet, according to the officials.
That the people of New South Wales are appalled by this behaviour, and I want them to know that New South Wales Police are doing everything possible to catch these people, and over the last week and a half have arrested 10 people for malicious damage, fire damage, graffiti attacks in New South Wales. No stone will be left unturned or upturned in order to catch individuals who are responsible for these activities. Obviously, police will answer questions and give information about a very serious ongoing inquiry into a potential terrorist event in New South Wales. This represents undeniably an escalation in race-filled hatred and potential violence in New South Wales. We're very concerned about it.
Now, 23 EU members who also belong to NATO are likely to agree to raise the defence spending target above the current 2% of the national output at a June summit of the alliance that will set a new level. That is what European Council President Antonio Costa had to say. And dozens of soldiers took part in military training near the front line in the eastern part of Ukraine. The drills are focused on sharpening urban combat skills that were held in Donetsk region and organized by the 108th Separate Mechanized Battalion known as Da Vinci Wolves for their newly recruited troops.